Welcome to Money Psychology, a series where we dig into the hidden forces that really drive our financial lives. I want to start with a question. What if your biggest money problems aren't really about money at all? What if they're just echoes from your past, things you don't even consciously remember? In this first part, we're going to unpack how stress from your childhood can cast a very long shadow over your finances as an adult. So, let's get into it.
Okay, think about that feeling of financial anxiety. You know the one, that knot in your stomach when you look at your bills, or that hesitation you have before buying something. You might think it's about your current bank balance, but it's probably not. The roots of that feeling, they're usually hidden, buried in these unseen scars from our past. And to really get it, we need to ask ourselves a few pointed questions. You've worked for it. You're stable. But a simple, necessary purchase can feel, well, reckless. Why is there such a disconnect between the logical numbers on the screen and that intense emotion you feel?
Or how about this one? This simple act of looking at your finances brings on this wave of stress, so you just avoid it. But of course, avoidance just makes things worse. So what's the real fear driving that behavior?
And finally, there's that feeling of constant insecurity, a sense that no matter how much you earn or how much you save, it's just never going to be enough. If that feeling isn't tied to your income, then what is it tied to? The answer to all of this, it isn't really about money.
This statement really gets to the heart of it all. You know, our first lessons about money, they didn't come from a classroom. We just absorbed them through overheard arguments about bills, through the whole emotional atmosphere of our childhood homes. We were conditioned to see money as one of two things, either safety or danger.
And that is the absolute crucial point. The financial behaviors that confuse and frustrate you as an adult, they aren't a personal failing. They are predictable psychological patterns that were etched into your mind years ago. You see, this isn't a money problem, it's a memory problem, an old emotional program that's still running your life today.
So, if this is a predictable pattern, it's got to have a name, right? And it does. Researchers have a clinical framework to understand how these early stressors in life create such long-lasting effects.
They're called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for short. And look, this isn't just about growing up in extreme poverty. It covers a wide range of household challenges. Things like witnessing your parents fight about money constantly, emotional neglect, or a parent dealing with addiction or mental illness. These kinds of events create what scientists call toxic stress, and the consequences can last a lifetime.
And what's really startling is just how common this is. It's not a small thing. A landmark study from the CDC and Kaiser Permanente found that nearly 2/3 of all adults, that's 64%, have experienced at least one of these ACEs. So when you look at this, what it's really telling you is that this is a shared experience. This isn't some niche issue affecting a few people. It's a widespread public health reality. That feeling you might have, that you're all alone in your financial struggles, the data says, no way, you are far from alone. 64% of us are carrying the weight of these experiences. Okay, but how? How does something that happened when you were a kid turn into financial stress decades later? Well, the connection isn't just psychological, it's biological. This is the science of how stress can literally rewire the brain to be afraid of money. When you're a kid, your brain is incredibly moldable. And that toxic stress we talked about, it can physically alter the brain's development, especially in the areas responsible for things like impulse control, planning, and risk assessment, the prefrontal cortex. Think of it this way. The brain's default setting is for growth and long-term strategy, but toxic stress forces it to rewire for pure survival. It overdevelops the fear center, the amygdala, and learns that the world is an unsafe place. It prioritizes short-term safety over any kind of long-term planning.
And this is where we have to clear up a big misconception. A lot of people assume this is purely an issue of childhood poverty, but the research shows that's just not true. While these experiences are more common in lower-income households, they are prevalent across all income levels. A high household income doesn't shield a child from the trauma of divorce, neglect, or substance abuse in the home. It's the emotional environment that leaves the mark.
And this brings us to the core finding of the research. Economists modeled what predicts financial stress in adults. As you'd expect, having a high income has a significant positive impact. But the second variable is just as powerful. The number of ACEs a person experienced has an equally significant negative impact. This means that childhood trauma is a predictor of adult financial stress, completely independent of how much money you make.
The researchers were unequivocal about this. The emotional conditioning from childhood trauma simply overrides the logical security that a high income should provide. The fear you learned as a child doesn't check your bank balance before it reacts. It just reacts.
So, we have the science. Now let's look at how this conditioning actually shows up in the real world. in the day-to-day decisions that shape our financial lives. This conditioning creates two very different paths. On one side, you have these fear-based behaviors. They're all reactive, driven by a deep-seated need for safety and a fear that there won't be enough. On the other side, you have strategic behaviors. These are proactive. They come from a place of security, which allows for planning, engagement, and a focus on long-term growth.
So let's break down the science of this scarcity conditioning. It can look like extreme frugality, that feeling of guilt when you buy something you genuinely need. Or it can be the complete opposite, impulsive spending, just to get a temporary hit of relief from the pressure. It's hoarding cash in a savings account because the stock market feels less like an investment and more like a casino. It's intense anxiety over a totally manageable car loan, treating all debt like a 5-alarm fire. And maybe the most damaging of all, it's the belief that your self-worth is tied to the number in your bank account.
So just take an honest look at this list. Which of these patterns feel familiar? Recognizing the pattern isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. And that awareness is the absolute first step toward taking back control from a fear that was programmed into you.
And that's really what this is all about. It's not about erasing the past, it's about understanding it so you can consciously rewrite your financial blueprint for the future. This is where we move from diagnosis to action. The path forward involves 3 crucial steps. First, awareness. This just means actively noticing your physical and emotional reactions. When you think about your finances, does your heart race? Does a big purchase make you feel guilty? The goal isn't to stop the feeling, but just to name it. To say to yourself, I'm feeling scarcity anxiety right now. This simple act reduces its power. Second, build systems. Your emotions are not reliable, but systems are. So automate everything. A percentage of your paycheck goes into savings, a fixed amount goes into investments, your bills get paid automatically. You design the system when you are calm and logical, so it can protect you when you are fearful and reactive. And third, and this is the hardest one, emotional detachment. This is the conscious, daily work of separating your identity from your income. You have to internalize this truth. Money is a tool. It is not a measure of your character, your intelligence, or your worth as a human being. And this is the most important thing to take away. Your conditioning is not your destiny. You are not bad with money. You were simply conditioned by an environment that taught you fear. Understanding this science shifts the entire narrative, from one of personal failure to one of personal empowerment. It's not about blame, it's about biology. And the beautiful thing about our brains is their ability to change, to form new connections, to learn new ways of operating. And awareness is the key that unlocks that potential. This awareness is the foundation for everything that follows. In Part 2, we'll build on it by exploring a powerful cognitive bias known as loss aversion. We'll examine the science of why the fear of losing $100 is psychologically far more powerful than the pleasure of gaining it, and how this deep-seated fear quietly sabotages our ability to build wealth. I hope you'll join me as we continue to decode the psychology of money